Going to talk about that now with James Creedon, who joins me here on set. James, just tell us first of all about the history of these incredible statues, just what they represented, really.
Well, they went back to the 6th century, and this was a time when that part of central Afghanistan had quite a Buddhist tradition, and so it was a holy Buddhist site. It was on the Silk Road, and so Bamiyan was a place where there was an awful lot of people passing through. There was an awful lot of cultural sort of activity there, and these were the classic style of the Gandhara art. It was sort of a combination of Buddhist art, Gupta art. They were the tallest, as you said, Stuart, Buddhist statues in the world. They were a feat of engineering at the time. What we would have seen 20 years ago is just the sandstone carving, but at the time there was mud and sort of straw stucco on top of it. So as with many ancient monuments, the pyramids of Egypt, for example, what you would see in modern times is only a pale shadow of what the splendour that would have existed back in the day. They were extraordinary cultural artefacts, and the Taliban utterly destroyed them, partly because the Hazara community that had guarded them, these were mainly Shia Muslims around that area. There was ethnic conflict within Afghanistan at that time. The Taliban had come in in 1996, and initially they said that the Buddhist statues should be treated with respect, but the Taliban was, I suppose, was crisscrossed with differences within the organisation. There were moderates and there were extremists, and the extremists would have had a certain amount to do with Al Qaeda. Let's remember that back at this time, Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda were being given safe haven in Afghanistan after being thrown out of Sudan in 1996. So it was a very radicalised time in Afghanistan's history, and this was meant to be a spectacular, I suppose, statement to the world. There was something almost of a PR quality about it because it was designed to shock, if you go back.
So what were the reasons for it, James? I mean, looking at the pictures of it exploding there.
Well, I suppose ethnic conflict within Afghanistan, certainly putting the thumb down on the Hazara community, who had guarded, even though they were Shia Muslims themselves, they guarded this as part of their heritage going way, way, way back. And so the mainly Sunni Taliban were doing it as an act of brutality, really, and suppression. But then there was also something of a demonstration of power or belligerence on the world stage. Because, in fact, what happened at the time is they gave notice. They said they issued an edict saying that this was going to happen. That triggered a huge amount of response. And then it went ahead, starting from today, the 11th of March, 20 years ago, over a period of about 25 days. They used the Air Force sending rockets into these statues. When that didn't work, they got prisoners in the local area of the Hazara community to plant dynamite all around the structure, and they completely destroyed it. The mountain itself, where these statues were etched into, is in itself in a precarious and delicate situation today. It was an act of monumental brutality. Some would say it was the first act of cultural terrorism in the 21st century.
20 years on then, where are we now?
Well, unfortunately, it left a legacy because Islamists in Libya, Pakistan, Tunisia and Egypt were sort of inspired by that. The media impact of it, unfortunately, did leave a legacy. The Taliban not in power anymore, but we did see last year that the US has said that they're going to draw down their troops in Afghanistan. Many feel that without US support from the air and on the ground, that the Taliban will be very difficult to keep back. And so I suppose there is that fear. The UNESCO have, since I think 2003, been trying. They turned it into a heritage site. There are various efforts to rebuild. There's a degree of uncertainty about whether it is useful to fully rebuild the statues, whether or not it would be authentic. Some would say that the larger of the two statues should be, in fact, left as a sort of a monument to the destructive legacy of the Taliban. So as we would see with certain sites after World War II, in Berlin, churches that weren't rebuilt and whatnot, that also would have, I suppose, a quality of a legacy and a memory worth even in the absence of the statues, worth remembering.
James, thanks very much. Good to remember that event, good to remember it 20 years on from when it first happened.